Shalom everyone. Be'ezras Hashem, today we're going to learn in Maseches Berachos Nun Hey Amud Aleph. We're going to have 4 sections in today's learning, and we're going to begin at the bottom, the last 3 lines, the third to last line on Nun Daled Amud Beis. First section we'll discuss certain behaviors that lengthen or shorten a person's life. Second section we'll get to discusses the particular items that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has direct control over, and we'll discuss that when we get there. Third section we'll deal with is Agaritas relating to Betzalel coming up, when he was the one who built the Mishkan. And the fourth and final section we'll begin to discuss dreams, their effect, their significances, which will really lead to the discussion as we continue on in this parak. So let's get started. Be'ezras Hashem, the third to last line on Nun Daled Amud Beis. Amar Rav Yehuda Shlosha Dvarim. So let's get started here. Amar Rav Yehuda Shlosha Dvarim. 3 things. Ha'ma'arich bahen. If somebody extends these 3 things, ma'arich in yamav v'shnaisav shel adam, they also extend the years, the days and the years of a person. So somebody that engages in an extended behavior of these 3 items will also experience long life. What are the 3? Ha'ma'arich b'tfilasai. Somebody that extends his prayers. 2, v'hamarich al shulchanai, somebody that extends his meal on his table. We'll see in the Gemara exactly why that is. And 3, v'hamarich bebeis hakisei, he extends his time in the bathroom. So we'll see, we'll go through each of these and explain now why these are behaviors that lead a person to living long life. So let's go through them. Number 1, Mamarich b'tfilas, Mal Yusa, he asks the Gemara, is it true that having an extended prayer is a benefit, will give a person a long life? The problem is, Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Chia bar Abba said the name of Rabbi Yochanan, turning to Nun Hey Amud Aleph, Kol Amarich b'tfilas ma'ayin ba, anybody that extends his tfilas and is ma'ayin ba. At this point, the Gemara says he davens with a lot of kavana. Rashi explains, assuming that he would be answered because he invested so much time in his tefillah. So somebody that relies that he'll be answered in his tefillah because he davens in an extended format, saif bali de kayev lev, in the end he'll lead to heartache. It'll lead him to heartache. Shene'emar, like the pasuk in Mishlei says, tocheles memushcha, somebody, tocheles, Rashi says lashon of tefillah, he prays in an extended way, machalel lev, causes him to have heart pain, causes him to be sick in his heart. Rabbi Yitzchak, and similarly, Rabbi Yitzchak says, 3 things remind HaKadosh Baruch Hu of the sins of a person, causing a kitrug, a negative energy against him. Ve'elohein, what are they? Kirnatoi. First of all, if somebody walks by a leaning wall, meaning a person who's not careful, he puts himself in a dangerous or precarious situation. So this creates a gzar din against him. You don't care about yourself, and you're putting yourself in a dangerous place, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu starts reviewing his averos. And 2, v'iyon tefillah, and this is going to be, the Gemara assumes it means focus in tefillah, assuming his tefillas will be answered, but in an extended sort of tefillah. U'maiser din al chaver l'shamayim. And the 3rd is somebody that castigates another against another in heaven, meaning is that he starts to look at another person in a negative way, saying, as Rashi explains, that he's confident in his own abilities that his friend will get punished because of his own schuyos. So this is a negative thing, because in Shamayim, then they start to look at your schuyos and say, do you taka have schuyos or not? But one of these 3 that we see clearly ends up in a negative way, reminds Hashem of the averos of a person, is iyon tefillah. So this seems to be a very negative thing. What does Rav Yehuda mean when he says ma'arichin betfillah is ma'arichin yamav? It extends his years. So the Gemara says halekashya, no problem. There's 2 types that we're discussing here of ma'arichin betfillah. Had ma'ayin ba. One is that he relies on it, or it creates expectations. He davens in an extended fashion, and it leads him to have expectations that his tefillos will be answered. That's what the Berachos means when it says this negative idea. Rabbi Yitzchak says it's negative. That's what's being mentioned here. Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yitzchak, that's what they're talking about in a negative sense. And hadaloi ma'ayin ba, but somebody that davens in an extended way, in a beautiful way, without expectations that he'll be answered, that's the right thing. V'hechi of it. So what is the right approach? The mapish beracham. He increases in prayers of mercy in front of Hashem, and he doesn't expect that he'll necessarily be answered. That's a person ma'arichin yomav v'shnaisav. Let's continue on. What was the second item in the list of Rav Yehuda? V'ha'amarich al shulchanai. What's the idea of extending your meal? In Pashtus, it sounds like you eat well, so you'll have a long life. But that's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara says if you have an extended meal, Dilma asi anya v'yahivle. So you'll be able to give to poor people who come to eat at your table. You extend your meal, and then poor people will come and participate. Like the pasuk tells in Yecheskel, Hamizbeach. Yecheskel is prophesying about the third temple, and he says over there, Hamizbeach eitz sholosh amos kavoya. The mizbeach of wood was 3 amos tall. And the pasuk continues to say, Vayedaber Elai, he spoke to me, Zah shulchan asher lifnei Hashem. This is the shulchan, the table in front of Hashem. So the obvious discrepancy is Pasach b'mizbeach v'sayim b'shulchan. Why does the verse initially begin talking about the mizbeach, the altar, and conclude talking about the shulchan? That's an entirely different vessel. So Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar, Dami Tarfai, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar both explained the psukim are creating somewhat of an equivalency. What is that? As long as the Beis HaMikdash was around, Mizbeach mechaper al Yisrael. So people brought karbanos on the Mizbeach, and it atoned for the Jewish people, and it brought good favor on their behalf. V'achshav, but now we don't have a Mizbeach, because we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. Shulchanai shel adam mechaper alav. A person's table will atone for him. How does this table atone for him? He has over guests, and he takes care of other people. So memela, if you're ma'arichin al shulchano, means you have an extended meal, and you take care of poor people, Hashem will give you this bracha mechaper, and you'll have a long life. Continues the Gemara. What was the third item of Rabbi Yehuda? It said, "V'ha'amarach b'beis hakisei." He said, if you have extended time in the bathroom, asks the Gemara, is that true? Mal yusei. Who is that a good thing? V'hatanya. But the Brisa says, "Asar devar mevinis adonai de tachtonios." There are 10 behaviors that bring a person to hemorrhoids. What are they? Ha'oichel alei kanim, somebody that eats the leaves of bamboo. V'alei gefanim, the leaves of vines. V'lo gefanim, the shoots of vines. U'marige behema, the ridged parts of meat. V'shidra shel dug, the spine of fish. V'dug maliach, salted fish. She'enim avushal called tzarkai, or salted fish that wasn't cooked all of its need. V'ashoiseh shimriyayin, somebody that shmariyayin, anybody that drinks the sediment of the wine. V'amekanech besit, someone that wipes himself, he cleans himself after the bathroom with a lime-covered stone. Uvecharsis, or with earthenware vessel. V'amekanech bitzror shekinech bechaveroi, or if he wipes with a piece of a wood chip of some sort that his friend also wiped with. V'yesh oimrim, and some say, also somebody that literally means he suspends himself in the bathroom more than he should. So it seems to be extending your time in the bathroom is not necessarily a good thing. Adarab, it leads to hemorrhoids. And for the Gemara, Kashya, no problem. When does the Brisa say that it's a negative thing, could lead to hemorrhoids? Is if you're suspending yourself, meaning he's extending himself beyond, but he's suspending himself. He's not sitting down. And as Rashi says, because he's suspending himself, he's holding up that pressure, it causes his bowels to open more than they should, could lead to these hemorrhoids. Whereas if you're not suspending yourself, it won't be an issue. So if he's sitting, for example, then an extended time in the bathroom actually could be a good thing, making sure that he is healthy. As we find in a story, a certain Roman noblewoman said to Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi, he was an exceedingly beautiful man, or he had a very pleasant countenance, very shining countenance, healthy look. And she said to him, Panecha daimim lemegadle chazirim ulemalvi beribis. Your face is like those who raise pigs or those who lend money. Rashi learns with interest. Rashi explains the reason she used the examples is because both these professions, they make a lot of money without much effort, and they're very happy with their lot. So their face shines, it exudes radiance. So it looks like your face shows that you do one of these two professions. So Amar Lasar, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi said back to this matronisa, this noblewoman, Hemanusa, you should trust me, Ledidi, Tarvayu Asiran. Both of these, for me as a Jew, are prohibited actually. Ela Esrim ba'arba be'sakise ikame yeshbizai lebei midrasha. But there's 24 bathrooms between my house and the Beis Medrash. Tchiazilna, that each, when I go to the Beis Medrash, badikna nafshoy bekulu, I check myself in each one. Means I make sure that if I need to relieve myself, I take care of myself, and that's why I have such a healthy, shining countenance. Continues the Gemara in the contrast now. Those were 3 behaviors that give a person extended life. But V'amar Rav Yehuda, Shloisha Devar Mekatzrin Yama V'Shnoisav Shaladam. Rav Yehuda continues and says, 3 things shorten the days and years of a person. What are they? Number 1, if someone is given a Sefer Torah to read and he doesn't read, means he's offered an aliyah and he does not take the aliyah. 2, if he's offered to lead Birkas Hamazon, take the kais shel bracha and lead, and he doesn't want to lead it. And we'll see the reason is because he doesn't bench the balabayas like he's supposed to, which is what the mizamein, the leader of the zimun, does. And 3, v'hamanig atzmai b'rabbanus, somebody that elevates himself or lords himself over with an air of authority over other people. So the Gemara explains as follows. The first one, sefer Torah likros ve'ena kaireh. Why would it be that if somebody doesn't take the aliyah, he has a shortened life, because we know regarding Torah, it says, Ki hu chayecha va'orech yamecha. Torah is your life and the extension of your days. So therefore, if you don't take the opportunity to get an aliyah to Torah, you're essentially cutting back on your days. 2, kais shel bracha levarich ve'ena mevarich. Why is it that if he doesn't lead Birkas Hamazon and he's offered to, he doesn't? He gets a shortening of his days. As the pasuk says, the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, Va'avarechecha mevarchecha. I will bless those who bless you. And those who bless other Jews, I will give them a bracha. So this guy was offered an opportunity to bless the balabayas. He didn't take that opportunity. He lost that bracha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would give him. And 3, va'amanig atzmai b'rabbanos, somebody that lords himself with an air of authority over others. Why is this mekatzer his days? Amar Bichama bar Chanina, mipnei ma meis Yosef kaidem la'achiv. We know Yosef died at 110. It was before the rest of his brothers. Why did he die before his time? As we know, the pasuk tells us, Rashi quotes, "Vayamas Yosef v'chol echa." First Yosef, then the rest of his brothers. Because he lorded himself with an air of authority. So that was his downfall, that he died before the rest of his brothers. So don't engage in these behaviors because they shorten a person's life. Let's move on to the second section now. We'll talk about certain items that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in direct control over. Let's see. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Shleisha dvarim tzrichim rachamim. There are 3 things that require particular merciful prayer. Rashi explains we have to daven in a specific way because these are things that are in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they only occur with his permission. Obviously, everything only occurs with his permission, but there's a certain direct involvement in these, as we'll see. Melech Toiv, that we have a good king. Shana Toiva, that we have a good year. We'll see. Weather, crops. V'chalem Toiv, and that we have a good dream. So let's go through them. Melech Tov, how do we know that Melech Tov, that the leadership of a good king is determined more directly by Hashem? The Chsiv, as the pasuk says, the pasuk in Mishlei, the pasuk tells us, Palge Mayim Leiv Melech Biad Hashem, like the streams of water, where a person could direct the stream, you could subvert the stream to a different direction. Leiv Melech Biad Hashem. So too is the heart of a king in the hand of Hashem. Right, rulers, HaKadosh Baruch Hu controls their decisions, and we have to daven because Leiv Melech Biad Hashem in more direct fashion. That's the concept of Hashem, is Melech Malchei Amlachim. What does it mean he's the Melech Malchei Amlachim? He's not the one who just appoints kings, but he also is the one that directs them. And therefore, we have to dive into Hashem that we have good leadership, meaning mortal leadership. Number 2, Shana Toiva. We dive into Hashem in a more particular way because He controls if we have good crops and good weather. Dichsiv, like the pasuk says, Tomid Einei Hashem Elokecha Bo. It's actually talking about Eretz Yisrael, and it says, constantly are the eyes of Hashem towards Eretz Yisrael. Mereishis Hashana v'Aracharis Shana. From the beginning of the year till the end of the year, we see there's a direct focus on the land that we have good crops and good weather to have good crops. Let's continue. Chaloim Tov. Where do we see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu directly is involved in our dreams and that we have a good dream? The Chsiv, like it says, Vatachlimeni Vatechayeni. Pasuk says, Pasuk in Yeshaya, it says, you caused me to dream and you gave, or Vehechiyeni, and you gave me life. So we see again, you, as he's talking directly in Yeshaya, you gave me a good dream and you gave me good life. That's again something directly in the hands of Hashem. So we should daven in a particular way because Hashem controls these 3 things directly. And on a similar note, there are 3 things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu announces on His own, directly. These are them. Ra'av, if there's going to be a famine. 2, V'soiva, there's going to be plenty. Uparnis Toiv, and if there will be a good leader. Where do we find that Hashem announces these Himself? Ra'av, there's going to be a famine. Like the pasuk tells us in Malachim Beis, it says, Kikara Hashem l'Ra'av, because Hashem called to the famine. V'goymer. Where do we find that Hashem directly calls out if there's plenty? Like it says in the pasuk in Yecheskel, the karasi el adaga, and I called out to the grains, v'herbesi, and I increased it. Shem ba'atzmai. Parnis Toiv, where do we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu elects or appoints, calls out directly that there will be a good leader? The Chsiv, like the pasuk says, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe, Lemar Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, when it talked about building the Mishkan, Re'ei karasi b'shem Betzalel v'goymer. See that I've called out in the name of Betzalel, etc., meaning I appointed Betzalel who will be a leader to build the Mishkan. So we see there's a direct calling that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does to appoint this good leader, who was in that case Betzalel. Now, moving on to the third section. Shalom. The third section, the Gemara now discusses Betzalel and his leadership. So the Gemara starts us off as follows. We know Betzalel was this fellow who was appointed in order to build the Mishkan. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Ein ma'amidin parnes al tzibor, ela im kenim lachem betzibor. It's the right thing to do. It's not appropriate, or it's the wrong thing if we appoint a leader over the tzibor without consulting first with the public. Shenamar, where do we find this? Because the pasuk first says Re'ei Anochi. It says, look, in a singular form. Hashem tells Moshe, look, I've appointed Betzalel. But then the pasuk says Shenamar Re'u Kara Hashem b'shem Betzalel. See, in the plural lashon, Hashem is called in the name of Betzalel. Why does it shift? So there was actually two steps here. Amar le'akadosh baruch hu leMoshe. First, Hashem said to Moshe, Moshe, Hagun alecha Betzalel. Is Betzalel an appropriate person to appoint for this task as a leader? So Amar Lai. So Moshe responded, Rabbanu Shalom, Im lefanecha Hagun. If you think he's fit, lefanai lekol shekain. Certainly, I'm going to find him to be fit. Amar Lai, Afal Pikein. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe, even so, even though it's obvious, lech emor lehem. Go tell the Jewish people. Halach v'amar lehem liYisrael. So he went and told the Jewish people, Hagun aleichem Betzalel. Would you like Betzalel to be in charge of building this Mishkan? So Amar Lai, they said, Im lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'fanechu Hagun. If he's fitting in front of Hashem and you, lefaneinu lekol shekain. So certainly in front of us, he's considered Hagun, fitting to build this Mishkan as our leader. This is just a big yesod, is that in order to appoint a proper leader, you want buy-in from the tzibor. Consult with him first, even though it's pashut that he's fit for the job. Continues the Gemara on this note. It's the second to last middle line of the page. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonasan. Betzalel, this fellow Betzalel, his name is actually an acronym, Betzel Kel, in the shade of Hashem, meaning that he had Chachma from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem Chachma se Nikra. His name is determined on his Chachma. B'shash Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe, because when HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe, Lech Amar leBetzalel, go and tell Betzalel, Aseli Mishkan Aron v'Kelim. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu instructed Moshe actually, tell Betzalel to first make the Mishkan, the structure, and afterwards Aron v'Kelim, make the vessels that are meant to be put inside of it, which is a logical thing to do, because otherwise you won't have a place to put the items if there's no structure. Holach Moshe v'hafach. Now Moshe went and he switched it around. We're not going to get into that now. There is what to discuss here. But Moshe switched the order. V'amar Lai. It sounds like by accident, but the Gemara says V'amar Lai, and he told Betzalel, Asay Aron v'Kelim u'Mishkan. He said, first make Aron v'Kelim, and then he said make the structure. So Amar Loi, so Betzalel turned to Moshe Rabbeinu. He said, Moshe Rabbeinu, minhaga shel olam, in the general minhag, the custom of the world is Adam b'nei bayis. First, the person builds a house, a structure, v'achar kach machnis l'toicha kelim, and then he puts the vessels, the furniture inside. And why are you telling me then to first build the kelim and then build the structure? So he said to Moshe Rabbeinu, kelim sha'ani oiseh, the vessels that I'm going to make, where will I put them? Maybe Hashem said to you, Asay Mishkan on v'kelim, first make the structure and then make the vessels. Moshe Rabbeinu said back to Betzalel, Shema Betzel Kela Isa v'yadata. Maybe you were in the shade of God and you knew, meaning is that you were mechav. You alluded to what HaKadosh Baruch Hu really commanded me, because yes, indeed, he did say to build the physical structure and then the vessels to go inside of it. So his chachma was such that he bavarned, he understood what HaKadosh Baruch Hu really wanted, even though the instruction was reversed. Continues the Gemara on this note of Betzalel. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Betzalel had the ability to join letters that HaKadosh Baruch Hu used in order to create heaven and earth, which is a tremendous level. Rashi learns over here, actually. He mentions, Al Yedei Tzirufan Uvesefer Yetzira Tanilahu. This is mentioned in Sefer Yetzira. So the point is that he knew a tremendous chachma. How do we know this? Because the pasuk says regarding Betzalel, Hashem filled Betzalel with the Spirit of God, bechachma uvetzfuna uvedas, with these three different lashonos of wisdom, with wisdom, intellect, and knowledge. V'ksiv hasam, and it says in Mishlei regarding Briasa Shel Olam, Hashem bechachma yasad aretz, Hashem fortified the earth, or made the foundation of the earth with chachma, kain and shemayim betvuna, and he established the heavens with tvuna. with insight. V'ksiv, and also it says in Mishlei, b'daitoi, with his knowledge, teha'imas, or with his intellect, Hashem, teha'imas nifko, he split the depths. So we find in terms of creation, it uses these three same terminologies, chachma, tfuna, and das, and by Betzalel it uses those same terms. Haraya, Betzalel had the same chacha of joining together letters that Hashem used in creating the world. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and on the final point over here in this section, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu noisin chachma l'mi sheyesh bo chachma. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not give chachma unless somebody already has chachma. Shene'emar, like the pasuk says in Daniel, Yohev chachmisa lechakimin, Hashem gives chachma to those who have chachma, uman da'a, and He gives das liyadei bina to those who also have bina. So Rav Chaim Volozhiner apparently says in his sefer, if He only gives chachma to those who have chachma, so how do you have chachma in the first place? So he says, Reishis chachma yiras Hashem. That means if somebody has yiras Hashem, so then he's fit for having chachma, mela he'll be imbued with chachma. Shomer Rav Tachlifa bar Ma'arava v'amr kamei de Rebbe Yavo. So Rav Tachlifa bar Ma'arava heard this idea that we just expounded. Kadosh Baruch Hu gives chachma to a chacham, and he said it in front of Rabbi Yavo. So he said, "Atu mehasamas nisula." You derive it from that pasuk in Daniel. But anan mehachamas ninanla. We actually derive it from here. This context of the psukim of building the Mishkan. Tichsiv, as it says, "Uvelev kol chacham leiv nasati chachma." Pasuk says, "I put in the heart of every wise man chachma." So you see clearly that Hashem gives chachma to a chacham. Let's move on now to the fourth and final section. We're going to talk about dreams. Really, this is going to lead us into a bunch of the rest of the parak. Agadata is relating to significance of dreams. Are they important, not important? What's the effects, etc. Amav Chizda. So if Chizda says, Kol chaloim v'loi tavus, all dreams are considered okay, this is how Rashi learns, unless you dream that you're fasting. If you have a dream that you're fasting, that's how Rashi learns, that is not considered a good thing. Amav Chizda continues and says, Chelma deloi mifshar, if you have a dream that was not interpreted, ki egarta deloi mekarya, it's like a letter that's not read. Meaning to say is, it won't be good and it won't be bad. All the dreams follow the interpretation. If you don't have an interpretation, you don't have to worry, you don't have to be excited, no issues. Amav Chizda continues, a good dream will not be entirely fulfilled, nor will a bad dream be entirely fulfilled. Meaning is that a dream is going to have some elements that will not come to fruition, and not all of it is going to be fulfilled. And we speak more about that later. Chizda continues, it's better to have a bad dream than to have a good dream. Why? So Rashi explains, because a bad dream, it scares a person, it shocks him, causing him to do tshuva, whereas a good dream is less significant, and therefore it's not as important. Chizda continues, a bad dream, the sadness you have when you wake up, that's sufficient. You don't have to worry more than that, because the sadness you experience is already a kiyum, a fulfillment of that dream. Nothing else will become of it. And similarly, if you have a good dream, is the joy you have when you wake up, that's the fulfillment, and there's nothing else that's going to happen. Rav Yosef was blind, and he wasn't such a happy person, seemingly. That's how the Rishon Farshim speak out here. He didn't get excited very often. So Rav Yosef said, that for me, even when I have a bad dream, the little bit of joy that I experience, it nullifies the effects of that dream, even though it's minimal. Like we said, he was blind and didn't necessarily have the joy that others may have had. Chizda continues, a bad dream has more of an effect on a person than getting whipped, than malchus. It's more effective. As Rashi explains, because it causes the person to be worried. And like we said, it causes him to maybe do teshuvah. Like the pasuk says, when the pasuk says, in Koheles, Hashem made something that would scare people in front of him. This refers to a bad dream. And the pasuk tells us in Yirmiyah, the prophet that has a dream should tell over a dream. And the one that has my word with him, he should tell over my word of truth. What is straw to the teven is the unimportant part, the straw, yes, the chaff or the straw to the grains. Nu'um Hashem, says Hashem. What's the comparison of the straw and versus the grain and dreams? Just as you can't have grains without some part that's a psilas, impurity, chaff. Every dream also has elements that are not true. Berachos says a similar idea. Even though part of a dream will be fulfilled, won't be entirely fulfilled. We learn this from Yosef. The Pasuk tells us when he has his dream. So he said, the sun and the moon and the stars were bowing down to me. Now, the moon was an allusion to his mother. So the Gemara says, turning to Nun Amud Beis, but his mother Rachel had already passed away, so she couldn't possibly be bowing down to him. So therefore you see from this Zakta Gemara that every dream has elements that won't be fulfilled. Similarly, we learn another idea of dreams from Yosef. If a person has a good dream, you should wait at least 22 years. From Yosef, we learn this, Yosef, that you should wait 22 years for it to be fulfilled, as is evidenced in the Parsha of Yosef. Like the Pasuk tells us there, Eila told us Yaakov Yosef ben Shvasrei Shana. We know Yosef was 17 when he was sold. V'ksiv, and the Pasuk says Yosef ben Shleishim Shana ba'amd lefnei Paroi v'goymer. We know that Yosef was elected viceroy when he was 30 years old. Min shivsri at tlasin kama have. 17 till 30 is tlasrei, 13 years. V'shev de shiva, v'shev de Savea, and the 7 years of plenty, Vitarti de Kafna, the 2 years of famine, that's plus another 9, 13 plus 9, Hachav Beis, this is 22. So his dream that they would come and bow down was 22 years before, and he held out because eventually it was fulfilled 22 years later. So therefore we deduce from this that if you have a good dream, it's Kedai to wait 22 years, maybe that's when it will be fulfilled. We'll stop here, we'll continue talking about dreams tomorrow on Nun Amud Beis, stopping towards the top of Nun Amud Beis. Everyone have a wonderful day.